frequent speaker at NATO events. So please welcome Don.
Thanks, Burke. Good afternoon, everyone. So nice to be here today. So we're going to have some fun with data as we go through this. Let me tell you what we'll be talking about for this first presentation, which will give you a nice idea of sort of what is happening today within the tobacco industry. We'll look at a few other industries. We'll see all of the things that are impacting this industry and some new things that I'll be showing you as well. Okay, first, I just want to make a statement. This presentation is not intended to be in any way predictive of what's happening in the tobacco industry. When we do these presentations, we look at it from a retailer's perspective. So we take into account how a retailer may be looking at their own business. It means nothing about any of our clients' business. It means nothing about forward thinking in terms of the industry itself. Simply looking at what's happening today and what are the impacts, what are the influences on this great industry. Okay, some of these we'll talk about today. We'll look at total trends across the US. We'll look at what's growing, what's declining in the nicotine categories. We'll do a trade channel analysis. An interesting section will be on Google Trends. What are people searching for, and what does this mean for the future? We'll look at marijuana and CBD oil impact on nicotine. First time we've ever done this type of analysis. I'll be showing you that today. We'll talk about menthol cigarettes, because that, of course, is of interest in the category as of today and going forward. We'll also look at flavors, right? It's tobacco flavor, possible tobacco flavor restrictions. And we'll look at what happened in Duluth, Minnesota when that restriction went in place. Because flavors are also very much in the spotlight today, we'll look at flavored cigar trends and vapor trends. And then finally, I'll give you a quick look on the impact of SET taxes. And if you're in an area where SET increase may be incurring, what would happen to your business, and what is this going to mean? So a lot of good things, we'll talk about them. First of all, a couple of terminology, particularly as we talk about vapor. So disposables are single-use disposable devices. You can throw them away immediately, cannot be refilled. E-liquids, of course, are the juice items. They come in a bottle. Cartridges, of course, are only cartridges, 2, 3, 4 in a pack, only the cartridges that refill some type of device. Kits include a charger or some other mechanism for recharging and using that device. So that's what a kit is. It typically will also include a cartridge. As I go through vapor, just keep in mind those definitions. All right, let's look at some total US nicotine trends. And I always start with this slide, so many of you may have seen it before, but I think this is important. Here, first of all, is a look at the United States, and those black areas, those are dots for each zip code in which we tracked a store that will be in the data I show you today. We have almost 300,000 stores across the US. The data that I'm using, though, and this is important to realize, is distributor shipment to retail. The reason that counts, particularly in the convenience category, and also helps within tobacco outlets, is many of those retailers do not scan. Therefore, some of the syndicated services, such as Nielsen or IRI, would not be tracking those stores. By my monitoring what's going into that store from distributors, we're able to tell you, give you a good feel for what's happening within each of these retail locations. The other thing that I'll mention, the data I'm showing you today is based on consumer units. A consumer unit is a unit through the cash register. Sometimes you can see some data programs will show you equivalized units, meaning equivalizing for the usage that a consumer may get. One usage occasion equals one. So a cartridge of 4 then would count for 4, and a pack of cigarettes would count for 1. In this case, each counts for 1 in what I'm showing you today. That's going to have an impact on the figures that I show you, so I want to make sure that I make that clear and that you see that as we go through it, and I'll explain a little bit more about that as we progress. Okay, first slide here. On the left is the percentage of stores in the US. So as an example, the way to read this, 57% of all stores in the US are convenience gas stores. 3% are tobacco outlets. 5% are drug stores, 9% are dollar stores, and 27% are all other trades, such as mass merchandisers, warehouse clubs, newsstands, those types of retailers. On the right is the percentage of volume, tobacco industry volume, attributable to that class of trade. So 71% of all tobacco sales in the US goes through the convenience channel. 8% goes through the tobacco outlet channel. Only 2% right now is going through the drugstore, and only 2% in dollar stores. I'll be talking more about that because that's a significant figure, that 2%. And then about 17% of all volume is going through the mass merchandisers, the all other classes of trade. That's good perspective as we look forward. Now, the first, by the way, I'm going to be showing an awful lot of numbers. Just listen to what I tell you. I will take you through each of these slides. I had a couple of new analysts working with me on this presentation, and I really think they were trying to prove themselves, and I have tons of numbers. But I'll explain to you what they mean. So let's start by looking at just this number right here, this 1.9%. This is saying that across all outlets, those almost 300,000 stores that I showed you in the beginning, the nicotine category is down about 1.9%. Now, typically in the past, when we've done this, it's been down about 0.2 to 0.3%. And in fact, if you look over the past 10 years, the nicotine delivery category has been fairly stable. Today, we're seeing a larger decline. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is vapor. When I mentioned to you about consumer units, and I said that the way I'm measuring this is each unit that goes through a cash register counts as one. Because vapor, and the largest seller in vapor is cartridges, which has maybe 4 cartridges in it, it still only counts as one. So as consumers shift, and we'll see this as we go through this presentation, from the combustible type products to a vapor type product or others, it's miscounting. It's not counting them as strongly. So that 1.9% is nothing to be too alarmed about. I really think it is far less than that, but because of the way that we track this data, that's what we're seeing currently in the trends, okay? Convenience gas is less than that at minus 1.4%. Tobacco outlets down about 2%. Tobacco outlets, I really think, well, several years ago, we used to say we think the price difference between the price advantage that a tobacco outlet could offer has not been as great as it has been in the past. Today, I'm going to tell you a little different story as we go through this. Drug stores are down about 13.3%. Dollar stores, look at this, the only green figure here, up about 10.7%. We'll talk about dollar stores as I go through this presentation, but keep in mind, dollar stores have been adding distribution, and you can see that on the second line. When I talk distribution, I'm talking store count. That means about 21% more stores are carrying tobacco items today than they did a year ago. That's significant, and they're starting to add quite a bit of volume, and you'll see that throughout this presentation. All other outlets are down about 3.5%. So the only good story here, right, is the dollar store is increasing at about 10.7%. But let's go on and see what's happening with that. First of all, let's look at the share of nicotine. Here's the way I would read this, and the key number to look at is this 67%. Here's why. Cigarettes, fourth quarter of 2017, a year ago, accounted for almost 70% of usage of a tobacco item. Today, it accounts for 67%. That's declining. What's picking up? Look at the next line at large cigars. Went from 17.8% share of this category to 19.4%, an increase in volume of 7.2%. Large cigars are a very strong story. We'll be talking about that as we go through this presentation. And you can see how it goes down the line. The others that have been increasing, you can see that snus is up as well as vapor. Vapor going from 0.6% to about a 1% share. Now keep in mind, I'll spend a lot of time talking about vapor, but look at the relationship of vapor to the other categories. Large cigars is about 20%, almost 20%. Vapor still is only at 1%. So through the conventional classes of trade, vapor still, relatively speaking, is a fairly small category. Let's go forward. I'll give you some trends now on the different subsegments. So cigarettes themselves. Right now in 2018, we saw about a 5% decline. I think that's where everybody's about netting out in that decline. That's typically greater than the 3 to 4% that we usually see. We anticipate that Juul had a lot to do this. In fact, we even count this on there, right? In a lot of cases, the vapor category has taken consumption away from cigarettes, and we're starting to see that particularly this year. We do think that'll moderate. Next year, cigarettes, we're anticipating, and our projection would be about 3.4%, just a guess, but we do expect it to fall more into the more typical range that we're seeing, the decline of about 3.5% per year. Okay, what about the trends? And let's just look at that across the different classes of trade. We can see convenience gas, the trend was not quite as great at minus 4.6%. Tobacco outlets down even less at 3.9%. Drugstores, 14.5% decline. And who's up, right? Dollar stores up about 4.3%. As I mentioned, we'll talk about that more. Notice I did break out menthol and non-menthol because of the issues between those two types of cigarettes. So look how menthol is up at 4.6% in dollar stores versus only 4.1% in non-menthol. Interesting little twist there. We'll talk about that more as we go through this. Okay, let's look at cigars. Here's a bright spot. Large cigars. Now, when we say large cigars, we define that as cigarillos. So these are cigars that really, they look just like cigarettes. To a certain extent, some manufacturers have taken their small cigars, which typically we consider 20 per pack, smoke like you would a cigarette, is a little cigar. Some have added a little weight to that. Now they fall into large cigar category, could be generating some of this growth. But we are seeing across all outlets that large cigars are up about 7.2%. Convenience gas even stronger, and convenience gas is a big story for the large cigar category at 9.2%. Outlets, and this is a change from past years, have really embraced this and are up now about 9.9%. Drug is down, but dollar stores, 35.5%. Keep in mind, though, as I talk about drug, most of the benefits that you're seeing today, most of this growth is due to simply adding of stores, doing to increase distribution, not necessarily to them doing things correctly. I will talk about that. It's a concern, but I will talk about that. And all other outlets are even up at 1.8% in large cigars. Large cigars are definitely a very positive story to this category. Little cigars are down about 2.8%. In a lot of cases, little cigars used to have many more tax advantages than you see today. In some areas, they are now being taxed similar to cigarettes, and that has hurt volume in little filtered cigars. Okay, let's look at moist. Moist has always been a very strong story, and through like 2012 to 2015, you can see it growing at 2 to 3% a year, some nice growth levels. That leveled out in 2017 and 18. To a certain extent, there were some returns of product during that time period, which deflated those figures. However, it was pretty flat, and we're projecting for next year just about a 0.5% growth. Moist is still a nice category. You'll see a little bit more about this as we go forward. Okay, what about OTP? A lot of numbers here. Once again, let's just look at these numbers right here. This first column right in here. So across all outlets, who's up, who's down? Moist, it says minus 0.6. That's pretty much flat. Snus is up at 3.3%. Really small volume, but it is growing. Roll Your Own is down about 23%. Pipe tobacco, which in a lot of cases consumers have gone to pipe from Roll Your Own, is down only about 5%. And papers, tubes, wraps are pretty much flat. Where do you see the green here, though, right? In dollar stores, and you can see what's happening there. Keep in mind, though, as you look at that, when you see distribution, they're all adding stores. So many more dollar stores are starting to carry the tobacco category than were before. That's accounting for this growth. Okay, what about vapor? Here's a really positive story as well. So let's look across again, all outlets, that first column up in the left, these numbers up in here, 95.2%, that's what cartridges are up this year versus last. A huge success story. I will say, since we've been tracking vapor, cartridges are always the category that has been growing the biggest since we've been tracking 8-9 years. Disposables are up only 1.5%. To some people, that's a surprise because they would have anticipated that disposables were declining. Many people had written them off in 2015, 2016. But keep in mind, they're still growing. Particularly, look at drugstores. Disposables work very well in the drugstore channel. Look at dollar stores, though. They just started to add them. That's off a very small base. I would ignore that number. Kits are up about 80%. In the past, we've seen that kits have been declining. With the addition of Juul and some other products this past year, we have seen that kits have really rebounded and that many people are now buying kits as they were not in the past, and kits have become very strong this year. E-liquids, I'll talk more about this. E-liquids are down quite considerably at 42%. This category is practically dead in the conventional classes of trade. Interestingly, we also track sales results in the vape shop channel. And in the vape shop channel, liquids continue to grow and do well. Particularly now they're getting into some premium liquids that are really boosting their business. But in the conventional classes of trade, the e-liquid is pretty much gone. And I'll show you that as we go through this. Okay, let's look at the growth and decline in the nicotine categories themselves. First of all, let's talk about cigarettes, and I just want to point this out here. Cigarettes versus all of the tobacco. Cigarettes, the bar in blue, down about 5%, 5.1% in this case. We're looking at fourth quarter. But all other tobacco is up about 6.1%, right? So across this category, you see there are growth areas, and cigarettes, though, even though they account for the vast majority of sales in this category, about 2/3 of the sales, they are declining at about the 5% as we have been discussing. Okay, price tiers within cigarettes. Interestingly enough, the super premium category has been growing. It's been growing for the past several years. It's up about 1.5%. The premium category is down about 5.4%. The deep discount category is down about 10.2%. And I'm sorry, the discount category is down about 10.2%. And we see deep discount rising at 6.8%. This is a more recent trend that we've been seeing now for about a year. Prior to that, we had been seeing the discount category growing, but it's really going to deep discount. In a lot of cases, when we looked into it, we saw that private label was driving a lot of that growth, most recently in deep discount. We can look at a lot of what's happening in the economy. I mean, gas prices are declining. People are now beginning to feel it. That may be driving what's happening. At the same time, though, some people are feeling a pinch. So it really is going to the two ends of the spectrum. And we'll talk about this more as I get into the SET increases, because there's some consumer behavior that always impacts these categories. But this is the current trend. So deep discount is really coming off very strong most recently. All right, what about all other tobacco? The size of the bar, and let's look at fourth quarter 2018, which is on your right. I need this. Okay, so let's look at these figures down in here. The relative size of that bar indicates the size of the category. So just at a glance, you can see that large cigars of the OTP categories are really your largest category, and they're growing at about, in fourth quarter, about 8%. Little filtered cigars, as we talked about, was down about 3%. Moist is down about 0.2% fourth quarter. Papers, tubes, wraps is down just a little bit. Look at roll your own, paper tube, roll your own is declining. We have pipe tobacco down about 0.4%, snus about 3% increase, and vapor at 130% increase. But remember how I talked about the relative size of these categories. And the size of the vapor category versus the others, you can see it illustrated here, right? So we talked a lot about vapor, but still a very small percent of the category. A lot of retailers will emphasize that category, and you should, because it has great growth potential. But keep in mind that your OTP category, which is growing rather strong, that there's some very strong categories, particularly large cigars there. Again, when I speak large cigars, I'm talking about the cigarillo type product. Okay, what about the vapor category itself? We talked about the importance of cartridges and how important that has been. You can see here a 157% increase in cartridges in fourth quarter of 2018. Disposables up about 4%. Kits up about 116%, and the only decline, and it is so negligible right now, it's almost not even worth talking about, within the conventional classes of trade, a decline of minus 42% for e-liquids. Okay, when I show you this trade channel analysis, I'm going to go through this a little quickly, as if I haven't been already, but here's the way to look at this, and I'll take you through each of these stories. The first slide I'll show you will be distribution. It means it's stores, it's store growth. The second channel will be volume, and let's look at each of these categories and see what's happening. The first one is cigarettes. 57% of all cigarettes sold go through convenience gas. Keep that figure in mind. 57% of all cigarettes sold go through convenience gas. The second largest class of trade is really the all other channel, right? That's a little interesting results. Today, though, 9% of cigarette distribution is in dollar stores. And here's the point I want to make to anyone, any tobacco outlet retailer in the audience. Dollar stores right now represent, as we had shown, only 2% of total volume here in the US. But keep in mind that they have, right now, there's about 30 to 40,000 dollar stores in the US. Current count on tobacco outlets, and it can, some can cut across different class trade, but it's about 12 to 15,000 stores. If we look at that ratio, there's about 2 to 3 times the number of dollar stores as there are tobacco outlets. There's power there, and that's why we have to continue to watch what's happening in the dollar channel versus our tobacco outlet business and our convenience business, because they could be a real threat as time goes on. They actually haven't quite figured it out yet. I'll show you as we go forward here some interesting things about the dollar channel. They haven't quite figured out the right product mix or what to be selling, but I will tell you, when they do, the fact that they have 3 times the number of stores as many tobacco outlets, you should watch that. The other thing to watch is consumer perceptions, right? Because many tobacco outlets in the past have sold on price and the ability to attract consumers who are really more price conscious than their shoppers. That's their impression of dollar stores. So the impression is that they can maybe get the same deal at a dollar store and rather than having to drive, which is usually closer to them than having to drive to a tobacco outlet. So keep that in mind. And if I were a tobacco outlet, I'd be looking at what's selling. If there's a dollar store near me, I'd be looking at what's selling there, because that could be a key to managing your business in the future. But anyway, let's go on. So cigarette volume, here's the volumes. First thing you notice is there's seasonality to cigarettes. This happens all the time. People make their New Year's resolutions, they drop off, they pick back up in the summer, they drop off as the New Year comes on again, and you can see that across this. The other thing to realize is the importance of volume of the convenience channel, which is the blue color. So how very important it is in the blue, and you can see again that the all of the trade in the green is sort of secondary in importance. Now look at moist. We talked about cigarettes being 57% of all cigarettes sold being in the convenience channel. 72% of all moist distribution goes through the convenience channel. So while it's a far smaller category, it's a more important category to the convenience channel as compared to the other classes of trade. Keep that in mind because it's important for convenience to realize. In the dollar stores, you can see it's 5%. That's picking up. And tobacco outlets now are in the 3% range. Watch that. You don't want to see tobacco, in general, you wouldn't want to see your dollar store taking any business from you. It may be starting to happen as we look at these figures, so let's just watch that. In terms of the volumes itself, though, you can see convenience gas accounting for the great majority of sales within the moist category, and you can see about equally split between the all of the trade and the tobacco outlet today. So that business is still good for tobacco outlets, but we have to watch those distribution figures. Okay, large cigar distribution, 67% of all large cigars are sold through convenience. Remember, it's only 57% for cigarettes. Large cigars, again, an important category. And the second largest tobacco category, very important to convenience. 8% through dollar stores. Again, look at that figure, of the other class of trade, excluding all other, it's the second largest now in terms of distribution. We've got to begin to watch these figures very closely. Let's go on to volume. Volume, again, you can see the importance of convenience in this, but look at the importance also of the all other class of trade, mass merchandisers, newsstands, that type of thing. Really quite significant in terms of the impact that the all other trade can have on this category. Keep in mind, too, you don't see the seasonality as you did with cigarettes, so these are a more steady seller within your stores. Okay, little filtered cigar distribution, 62% through convenience, 12% through dollar stores. Dollar stores actually have added quite a bit of distribution of little filtered cigars over this past year, really starting to take advantage of this category. In many cases, it makes some sense, particularly in those areas where there's a tax advantage, so it provides the value buy that most dollar shoppers are looking for. And you can see tobacco outlets are in the 7% range. In terms of volumes, we see here again, now you notice in terms of little cigars that you don't see the predominance of blue. It's still the largest band, but nowhere near the predominance we've seen in some of the other categories. Look at the importance of tobacco outlets. That's why tobacco outlets need to watch this category, particularly if dollar stores are beginning to infringe on your business. Although the class of trade is also very important to little filtered cigars. A closed vapor e-cigarette distribution, 77% of all this volume goes through convenience. You can see how important convenience is to managing this entire category because it isn't just cigarettes that count, but in many cases, many of these other categories account or rely on the convenience channel far more heavily. Let's look at volumes. Look at this closed vapor this is closed vapor distribution. Look at the growth in most recently in the closed type system, really selling very well in the conventional classes of trade, particularly convenience. And let's look at volume. Let's hopefully look at volume. Hold on a second. All right, so we have little filtered volume, we have distribution. Well, we're just going to go with the slides that are coming up here. All right, closed vapor distribution, you can see how it's growing. We've talked about that. Let's look at cartridge distribution, 78% in the convenience category. Keep in mind, cartridges are huge sellers in the convenience category. You can see here accounting for 78% of the distribution of that category. Here's cartridge volume, and now you can see how that's growing. Look how significant it is. It's always been very important to the convenience channel. Look how it has grown quite considerably. If I were a tobacco outlet, I'd pay attention to this. There's a lot of business in cartridges. Make sure you have a good supply, the right selection of cartridges for your shopper, because you should be able to pick up a little bit more on this. Look at the thinness of the tobacco outlet band in this case. Let's look at disposable distribution. Again, 63% in convenience gas. Again, I mentioned how important disposables are to the drug class of trade. 26% of all disposables go through drug. It's very important to that area. Here's disposable volume. Now look at how it really was very, in the beginning that we're tracking here in January of 16, how important it is to the convenience category. That would be over in here. And you can see then the band for drugstores. Well, look at the band now for drugstores in terms of disposables. Has really taken off there. The drugstore shopper really looks for those disposables, and that's something that really sells very well within that class of trade. Okay, what about kit distribution? Again, 83%. I think this might be the highest figure we've seen. 83% of vapor kits go through the convenience class of trade. Incredibly important. And what's nice about that for the convenience channel is, right, a high cash register ring. So it really is generating a lot of dollars through the cash register. And an important category here, 83% in kit distribution goes through convenience. Volume, you can see how that's taken off far more recently. You can see how it wasn't as important to tobacco outlets. Look how it's picking up there. Again, tobacco outlets, take a look at that, see if you have the right kits, because that could be another opportunity for your business. Okay, e-liquid distribution, I mentioned how this was really, really dying. Look at this, look at the volume of the distribution levels here, really being dropped by quite a few number of stores. Let's more importantly look at volume. You'll see a similar thing. E-liquid volume, look at this. Still important in tobacco outlets. Across the conventional classes of trade, tobacco outlets were one of the first retail channels to take advantage of e-liquids. You can see today, though, how that has dropped off, but still significantly more important to the tobacco outlet, which in some communities is shopped like a vape shop than it is in the conventional classes of trade, the convenience category. Okay. Papers, tubes, wraps, again, 68% through convenience gas. You can see how it falls out across the other classes of trade. This is a pretty steady category, and you can see in terms of volumes that it's pretty well split, and the paper tubes wraps really sell pretty well in the all other class of trade, the mass merchandisers, the newsstands, the transit locations, that type of thing. It's also important in tobacco outlets, so don't ignore that either for tobacco outlet, and a very steady piece of business, as you can see here as the volume is showing. Okay, pipe tobacco, 46% through convenience gas. This takes up a lot of space, not a lot of opportunity there. I'm gonna go quickly. The volume, you can see here, really important to tobacco outlets. Pipe tobacco, very important to tobacco outlets, and really has really shown a pretty consistent level of business across the 2 years that we're showing you here. Roll your own distribution, 62% in 52% in convenience gas. Again, it takes up a great deal of space. A little bit better item for a tobacco outlet. You can see here 20% goes through the tobacco outlets. In terms of volume, again, look at the importance though of the all other trade to the roll your own. Okay, let's take a little break from the hard facts on the tobacco channels. Let's look at what's happening with Google Trends. When I talk about Google Trends, when I'm talking about the number of people who are searching on Google for a specific word or a specific area, here's the way it breaks out. So, the blue line is cigarettes. You can see pretty consistent along the bottom that people have been searching on cigarettes. The orange line is chewing tobacco. Actually, more people search on chewing tobacco than they do on cigarettes. The yellow line is cigars, again, a fairly consistent level. The green line is vape and vapor, e-cig and Juul. We just combined them. And look how it took off, particularly as you were starting in about January of 17. Really, the number of searches are incredible. And then we also put on here CBD, because we know that CBD is going to be getting a lot of attention. Some people started to talk about it, particularly in the retail channels, would love to be able to carry it. Notice here, and I'll show you in the next slide as we begin to look at when we relate volume to searches, but look how CBD is starting to take off. That typically is an indicator of consumer purchase intent when consumers start to search on these items. It's a very strong indicator that there could be a significant amount of business quickly developing within that category. Okay, here's cigarettes. I'm just going to show you here. The orange line is the volume, so you can see the seasonality in that line. You can see the searches on Google. It's sort of in about April of 17, there was an increase there. The FDA was looking at some things about that time. There's some truth advertising going on, so you can see searches increased. Let's look how that compares to cigars. Here you guys have the orange line, again, is your volumes, and you can see the searches on that. All right, so nothing too outstanding here, but you can see how cigars have been going up, and searches have peaked at certain time periods as those volumes begin to rise. Here's vapor. Now look how search, and I just want to make this point as well, look how search has preceded the volume. So people started to search on vapor, and then the volumes caught up to it. This is why I say CBD, with that search going up, likely we're going to be seeing a return in volume as well. The volumes will follow that search activity. So people often search for items before they make a purchase. Keep that in mind. If you've got a website, if retailer, you have a website and you've got some new products, can't hurt to put that information out there. Put links to the manufacturer's websites so people can learn about the new products that you're carrying. In many cases, you don't have the time to explain everything that a consumer can get, the knowledge consumer get off the website. Search can be very important to generating potential volume. Okay, daily vapor Google Trends is a little funny. So the blue bar represents total vapor search, and I added, in this case, the first time we were showing this, people searching on Juul. What you can see here is that for vapor, in general, this is just a fun slide, most people search for vapor on the weekends, right? On Saturday and Sunday. Juul, however, is fairly consistent in the amount of searches that they get throughout every day of the week. Let me show you this next one. Okay, here's the time of day people do much searching, and this is a little bit funny. If you can see the absolutely top line, it does peak at 6 to 8, which is about the time that people get home from work, right? It also peaks around 3, 4 in the morning. And that's the time people probably get home from having a night on the town, and here's they're doing their searches for vapor in this. Look how it goes for Juul. It also peaks around similar time periods, a little bit more consistent, maybe peaking a little bit early, but a similar type schedule to when people really search for vapor items. I don't know, just a fun slide. Okay, let's get back to data. All right, so let me just show you CBD, because I mentioned how it's growing. So we did put some volume down. We're starting to see some volume in the distributors, the distributor shipments to retail. We're starting to see some CBD volume. You can see that way that's the search is heading and the volume's heading. So we're expecting that to begin to tick up quite considerably in terms of volume very soon. All right, here we go. Now these are going to be some interesting slides. Now this is our first look at this, and I want to tell you the results are preliminary, but I think there's some interesting results to be learned here. Now, this analysis was done prior to the mid-December decision on the Farm Bill that nationally made CBD items from hemp legal. So this was done prior to that, but let's see what we learn here, and I think you'll see some interesting things. Okay, so first of all, the map of the United States. The darker the color shows where the legality of marijuana. So the dark green, it's fully legal. Marijuana is fully legal. The light green, medical is legal. In the sort of olive green color, the weirder green color, only CBD oil is legal. This is just consider that CBD. That was prior to this December Farm Bill change. And then completely illegal is the states in white. But what happened to the cigarette business in each of those areas? So in the total US, cigarettes were down about 5%, as we said. Fully legal areas, cigarettes were down 5.4%. In the, let me see these, oops, I'm sorry. We can see these numbers down here. So 5.4%. In the medical legal, minus 5.5%, CBD 4.4, and then total legal 4%. I'm going to tell you this, I would say that had no impact. Those tenths of a difference are not meaningful. Keep in mind, no impact on cigarettes. What we're seeing currently, this is very early, in terms of where marijuana is legal. But let's look at a few other tobacco categories and see what we learned. Okay, here's cigar volume. Now keep in mind again, the states where it's fully legal are dark green, medical legal is in the lighter green, olive green is the CBD, and where it's totally illegal is the white color. But look at what happened. In those areas where marijuana is fully legal, a decline of 2.4% in cigar sales in those states, where in the total US, it was an increase of 6%. That is a significant difference. Where it's medically legal, right about the national average, an increase of 6.4%. Where CBD is only legal, 8.9% increase, and completely illegal, 6.2%. There's a significant difference here. Now, when a consumer uses marijuana, it is a smoking occasion, right? Cigar smokers typically aren't smoking it necessarily because they're not inhaling it typically. They're not getting the nicotine hit that a cigarette smoker would. So it's much more the feel, the act of smoking that could be important to them. And you see here that where marijuana is legal, it appears preliminarily that that may take the place of some cigar usage. And that's just something to keep in mind as laws may be changing in your state or whatever may be happening in your area, that this could have an impact. First time that we have seen this, in the past we have not seen this. First time we're beginning to see that there could be an impact between the use of marijuana and cigar-type smoking. Let's look at vapor. Okay, in the total US, it was up about 86, 87%, right? Where it's fully legal, again, it's only up about 60%. Where it's medically legal, it's up about 90%. And see, where CBD is legal, it's 100%, and 100% where it's completely legal. What is this saying? Again, significant results. Where a person is inhaling and using a vapor-type device or a smoking-type device, it has an impact on the vapor category at only a 60% growth. This is a significant result early, but one we're going to be watching. So we need to watch this because it does appear that where, when, and if marijuana becomes legal in your area, it may have an impact on your vapor business. So just keep this in mind because that could be some significant results. OTP, you can see what happened here. It declined nationally about 0.9%. 1.3 decline where it's fully legal, 1.6% where it's medically legal, 0.3%. You know what, no difference here. It really didn't impact OTP, right? You're not seeing the significant differences as you've seen in these other categories. Some interesting results. Just keep that in mind, but first time we're seeing a correlation between the legality of marijuana and the use of certain products, particularly cigars and vapor. Okay, let's just look a little bit at menthol, because menthol, of course, is becoming under FDA scrutiny. Some proposed rulemaking is in the works. What's going on with menthol? Let's just emphasize the importance of the menthol category. Here we see the non-menthol cigarettes, are the traditional flavors in blue, and menthol in the orange bar. The non-menthol, you can see, has been declining at about 5.8%. Menthol, far less declined at minus 4.1. You can see here that the traditional flavors are still far greater in importance in terms of the category, but menthol is a very important category. I'll show you more about this in a minute, and not declining as significantly. And in fact, you'll see this as we go through here, that menthol is a very important flavor. If we look at convenience gas, dollar stores, drug stores, tobacco outlets, and all of the trade, you can see it's pretty consistent, the importance of the importance of menthol to each of those classes of trade. In fact, it's fairly consistent. So across all classes of trade, menthol is about 1/3 of your sales, and cigarettes actually 30 to 40%, and can be very important to your business. If we look across the bottom, what's growing again? We see it, right? Non-menthol and menthol in dollar stores. Menthol increasing a little bit more than what the non-menthol cigarettes are increasing in the dollar store category. So they're starting to catch on to this category as well. Fairly important, though, across all classes of trade. I've got to get the trick to this. Hold on. Trying a different hand. There we go. Okay, so let's just look at menthol volume by state. Typically, menthol cigarettes have always sold best in the eastern part of the United States. I think that's pretty well known in the industry. And you can see the darker, the reddish color, it signifies those states with the highest level of sales of menthol cigarettes. You can see how it tracks. The sort of goldish color is, sort of a medium sales level, medium increase in menthol sales, and the lighter color is the least amount of increase in menthol sales. So, but let's look at where the growth has come from in menthol cigarettes. Because while it's very important to the eastern part of the US, when we look at growth, it's really all on the West Coast. And this is very interesting, a trend we haven't been seeing, we've been seeing now for about a year. So menthol cigarettes are growing this is growth levels. Menthol cigarettes are growing quite considerably in the western part of the US, meaning again, the same conclusion, menthol cigarettes are important regardless of the type of store you have, regardless of your location. Menthol is going to be pretty important, and the only exception may be California, which is a little bit of a surprise there, right, at the minus 5%. Okay, let's talk about Duluth, Minnesota. In Duluth, Minnesota, and this is some interesting results too, we saw where effective June 1st of 2018, they put a ban on the sale of flavored products to adult-only. So they limited the selling of flavored products to only adult-only smoke shops. So they limited on menthol cigarettes. They got rid of wintergreen mint moist tobacco and chocolate vanilla candy or fruit flavor vapor items. So only stores that only allow the consumer to enter that are over 18 are allowed to sell those items in Duluth. So we wanted to see, in this very good example, what happened to the business within Duluth versus some surrounding stores. Anybody have any guesses? You'd most likely be right. I'll show you what happened here. Okay, so first of all, here's what we did. We looked at Duluth itself. Those are the red dots, okay? So that's where the stores are banned. There are 69 stores where flavored products were banned in Duluth. The light red are less than 1 mile away. There are 14 stores less than 1 mile away. We'll look at what happened there. Blue is less than 5 miles, green 10 miles, yellow 25 miles, and black greater than 25 miles. So these are the counties all surrounding Duluth, and we looked at what happened to the stores in those areas. Okay, there's gonna be a lot of numbers. I'll take you through this. Okay, let's look at what happened. The total for that area, interestingly enough, cigarettes increased 4.9% in the total area. Non-menthol went up about 6.2%. Menthol, only 0.2%. Now here's why. The restricted stores, they saw their total cigarette business went down by about 18%. So in those 59 stores that were restricted from selling a flavored product, their total business declined 18%. Non-menthol was actually up a little bit at 3.4%. Why? Because some people wanted a cigarette, right? Couldn't get menthol, they just took whatever, the regular flavor, the non-menthol cigarette that were being sold in the stores. Their menthol business vanished, right, at 99%, almost completely gone. What happened to those stores like less than 1 mile away? Their total business went up about 53% in terms of their cigarette sales. Non-menthol, 12.4%, and look at this, a whopping 156% increase in their menthol sales. So, I mean, the people weren't crazy. So they banned it in Duluth, they drove a mile down the road, and they bought their menthol cigarettes that they wanted all along anyway. This is one of the things that we do find, and I'll show you more about when we look at SET increases. One of the things we find, when a small area restricts the selling of products that consumers want, the consumer just drives, right? And we've seen this time and time again. But what's interesting, I think, about this analysis is that it also increased, look at 156% here, 26% in those less than 5 miles away, 12% their menthol sales in 10 miles, 10% greater than 25 miles, and look at, greater than 25 miles even went up 5.5%. So even those consumers that were 25 miles away from Duluth that would normally buy, traveled, right? Either lived in that area or whatever, but made certain they bought their cigarettes that far out. And you can see here how, versus the average at a 0.2, it increased across the board in every store for as far away as they were. It was an interesting result. So here's about moist. So they got rid of flavors on moist, very similar type results. I know this is a lot of numbers. Let's just talk about in total. It was up about 0.5%. Restricted stores, they lost 53.8% of their business. If you look at wintergreen and mint, down that 100%. But what about 1 mile away, up over 80%? 5 miles away, up again. 10 miles, up. 25 miles, even over 25 miles, their business was up versus the total that said they should have been down. Consumers are driving, and they're going to drive as far as they need to get this product as well. So it worked for cigarettes. It worked for moist. What happened about snus? Very small category, but I showed this real fast. Okay, so total again, mint at 0.6% up. 100% lost in those stores where it was restricted. Doubled in the stores, 104% increase 1 mile away, and you can see how the increases went. Very similar results for snus as well. And I think we have one more vapor. Yips. Hang on. Okay, vapor, similar results as well. So again, let's look at the menthol area, total about 66%. Down by 120, 109% in these areas. The reason it's over 100% is there were some returns in this data, which then accounts as a negative. So that's the reason for 120%. But 250% increase in vapor, in menthol, the vapor flavor, in stores less than a mile away, less than 5 miles, 117%, 64%, 86%, even up 52.8% in those stores that were 25 miles away. Similar impact on vapor. The consumer simply moved to buying those items that they wanted, that they chose to purchase, right, and in different municipalities because they couldn't get it in Duluth. This is results that we have seen time and time again, but this is a pretty interesting figure, particularly as we went further and further out. Continuing to see those increases was pretty amazing. Okay, so we talked about snus. Let's go. Let's look at flavored cigars. Let's look at what's happening there, because flavored cigars are also being reviewed by the FDA. What does this mean to your business? First of all, in terms of if I combine cigarillos and little cigars, put the cigar industry together, 40% are non-flavored, so it's non-menthol. 55% of that category is flavored. Again, flavors being very important to that category. You can see on the bottom the results. Non-menthol up about 4.4%. Menthol actually declined in this category by about 7%. Mint down about 20%. You can see how that went, but this is even more interesting. Here we look at non-menthol, menthol, mint, and flavored. So the blue bar represents non-menthol sales up about 4.4%. And because this category is so driven by large cigars, which there's very little flavoring in terms of menthol and mint in the large cigar category, that's why those are so small. And then totally flavored was up about 3.8% across total cigars. This next slide, I think, is better. Let's look at what happens at convenience gas, dollar stores, drugstores, tobacco outlets, and all of the trade. What you notice here is the importance of flavored to convenience gas as well as tobacco outlet. So for those retailers in the audience, you can see here that flavored products within the cigar category are more important to your business than they are in the dollar store, the drugstore, or all of the trade. A critical point on this slide. Let me show you this next one, because I think what counts really is this one. Total cigars, as we saw, 55% of that category is flavored. But let's look at large cigars. 56.4% is flavored. 43% is the traditional type flavor, the non-menthol. For little filtered cigars, only about 25.5% of that category is flavored, as compared to menthol, accounting for over 20% of that category. Mint is very small, and non-menthol being about 54%. So some differences when we look at large cigars versus little cigars. Hold on. Okay, this is by state. Oh, what I'm showing you here is flavored cigar volume by state. Look at the strength of it in the West Coast, right? So you see that large flavored cigars are far more important to those areas of the West Coast. Middle part of the country, it's medium important. It's not as important on the East Coast, but still pretty significant geographic differences in the sales of the flavored product. So if you're at stores in a state here, you need to look at where your flavored business may lie. Okay. Similar thing, let's look at vapor and what's happened with flavored vapor trends. Okay, first of all, in terms of flavored, 42% of all vapor product is flavored. 23% is mint, 13% menthol, and 22% is non-menthol. So by far in this category, non-menthol is far less important to the vapor category as compared to either flavors like fruit or dessert flavors, and menthol and mint is quite important here to this category. Okay, what about by flavor type? How does it count? Non-menthol accounts for about 42%, 43% of this category. The menthol accounts for about 43%. These are the increases. 307% growth in mint. So mint is becoming very important to the vapor category, and a growth about 250%, almost 250% for flavored type products. So this is the growth rate that we're seeing. So flavored type, so keep in mind, this is as these considerations, this is where your category is going. And these are flavored items are very important to the business in this category. If I look at it just how it's gone, and I think this was somewhat significant over the past year. So the first bar that you see over here on the left is first quarter 2017, and let's look at fourth quarter now 2018, so almost 2 years later. Look at what happens here. The blue bar is non-menthol, and look what happens to the flavor, non-menthol flavor. As consumers are beginning to embrace the vapor category, they get much more into the flavors. They move from the tobacco items they earlier did, tobacco flavored, to clearly the flavored items. And you can see it was only 23% back in first quarter 2017. It's now 42% of this category here in fourth quarter of 2018. Speaking to the importance of the flavored items as this category continues to grow. Okay, how about by flavor type and trade channel? Here, I'll just show you some difference. You can see that it's fairly similar across all classes of trade. In effect, however, menthol mint is very important to convenience gas, not quite as important to tobacco outlet. And the flavored items are a little bit more important to tobacco outlets. That's a little bit interesting. In many cases, we have seen in the past where consumers who are starting to get into vapor, they typically go to the tobacco or the mint or menthol flavors. But in this case, and typically they would go to a tobacco outlet as a way of getting started, if they were going to try it, in many cases. They're really developing in the tobacco outlet now to a much more typical usage type pattern for a vapor who has been participating for quite a period of time, developing into the flavor. So if you're a tobacco outlet, make sure you're embracing those flavors, because particularly with other things besides e-liquid, because this counts a lot, or the trend is going far more toward that within your class of trade. Okay. How about if we look at vapor volume by the type of product? So you can see here that, let's look at flavored. Flavored is the yellow bar at the top. 42% of all cartridges are flavored. When you get into e-liquid, you can see it's at the 56. There's no surprise there, 56, 57%. But very important across both cartridge disposables and kits. You can see in terms of kit, however, because most people purchase a kit when they're just starting to vape, you can see here how important tobacco flavor, right, the non-menthol flavor is in the kit category. Far more important than it is in the others. So keep that in mind as you do your product selection in the vapor category. Those consumers that choose to get started in the vapor category, a lot of them will be looking for the tobacco flavor. An equal amount will be looking for flavored, but it's the highest level here within the kit subcategory. Okay, how about cartridge volume by flavor type? And this is illustrating here how important flavored is for the cartridge types. And you can see here how it's very important, particularly, in fact, flavored is the largest category in the way that that has grown. In fact, grown far more strongly in this case than the other, proving our point, right? Growing far more strongly than the other types of flavor categories within the cartridges. Here's disposable volume. Disposable has always been one of the ways that people had gotten started with an e-cig. They typically would start with a tobacco or non-menthol type item, that's the blue. And you can see the way they started, but look at the flavor, the impact of flavor on this. And you can see the way mint has grown as well. You can see it started in 2017, about April of 2017, but has grown quite considerably since then. Okay, kit volume by flavor type. Again, we talked about how kits, typically it's tobacco, and tobacco is still very important. But look how flavored kits have really taken off far more recently. And you can see several peaks in that in the 17 and 18. A lot of that, of course, was inspired by Juul. So, but you can see how that's changing. But still, the tobacco flavors, non-menthol flavors, very important in terms of kits. E-liquid, you can see here, again, tanking. But the importance of flavors here, and we've talked about that. Okay, let's look at our last section, importance of SCT increases. This past year, we saw SCT increases in approximately three areas. Kentucky, Oklahoma, and DC. I know there's a lot of numbers on this slide. I'll take you through those account. We're gonna look at the bottom half. We're gonna look at Kentucky, Oklahoma, and DC and see what happens. In July of 18, these three states, DC was in October, put into effect SCT increases, 50 cents in Kentucky per pack, $1 in Oklahoma, and $2 in DC. The colored areas represent what happened when that went into effect. So we can see that in terms of the volume change, that in Kentucky, with a 50% increase per pack, volume declined by 7.8% and 8.4% in those 2 quarters. $1 per pack, 15.6% and 13.4%. When the DC SCT increase went into effect, $2 per pack, a 43.5% impact in sales of cigarettes during that time period. What we typically see, and the advice we try to give as we analyze SCT increases, most municipalities will think they're going to, if they put $2 per pack, they're going to get a lot more revenue than they are if they put 50 cents per pack. But look what happens. This next part is SCT dollar change. In Kentucky, let's look at these two figures here. They did get quite a bit of an increase in SCT revenue, 69% in third quarter of 2018, 68% in fourth quarter. For the Oklahoma, which was $1 per pack, it worked again, 66% increase in their revenue and 70.8%. In DC, when this went into effect, only a 1.7% increase in their SCT tax revenue. Why? Because consumers were not going to pay that additional $2 per pack, and they lost that tax revenue. We tend to say this, what typically works when we see SCT increases, the smaller the SCT increase, almost the more money that municipality will make, that geography, because it really then does not discourage the consumption that typically happens when an SCT goes into effect. This is results that we have seen time and time again. To illustrate a little bit further, I'll go on to just showing this. So look at here, people knew the SCT was coming in, so DC is in the blue line, surrounding states, the orange line, and these are volumes. People knew the tax was coming. You can see here, they loaded up right before the tax increase, and look how volume tanked here, which is the reason that DC lost all that revenue, did not get the tax revenue that they were counting on. If I look at what happened a little bit, just to show you a little bit more emphatically, if we look at what happened after that SCT increase in DC, 43.5% drop, surrounding states are only 9.5% drop. You can see we didn't see a lot of pickup here, some, but not very much. I'd suggest this means that consumers have gone to a gray market, whatever. They're buying in sources that aren't being tracked, because we should have seen more of an increase here. That's what this is meaning. And in DC, there's a lot of municipalities around there for them to go and purchase additional cigarettes. So in effect here, consumers are just looking somewhere else for their product. Okay, if we look here about what category it mostly impacted, I'm just gonna call your attention to this bar right here. If we look at the super premium category, this is an unusual result, but one that we have, a hard to believe result, but one we've typically seen. When we see an SCT that goes into effect that increases the price significantly of a pack of cigarettes, a lot of consumers say, heck, if I'm gonna pay that much for a cigarette, I'm gonna buy the very best you have. And look at how super premium grew to 6.7% share as compared to 5.1% the quarter before. What we typically also see is, and it's very difficult to see in this, but deep discount goes up. It didn't in this case. Discount is pretty consistent. And here again, premium is fairly consistent. It's down a little bit. Usually premium takes the brunt of the hit when there's an SCT increase. Let's look at some of the other municipalities though. Before I do that, I'll just show you this really quickly. So we see here in DC, the volumes declined quite considerably, right? In terms of the other states, you can see here the deep discount picked up in those surrounding states. No surprise there. Consumers trying to spend money just traveled a little bit and bought a deep discount brand in a surrounding area. When we look at the trade classes, we can see here, again, pretty consistent, but dollar stores picked up a little bit. Again, the perception that dollar stores are offering the price advantage for this product. And then when we look across the tobacco categories, vapor, you can see was strong here, and you can see what happened in the surrounding states. So not as much impacted by that. And in fact, because Juul, in fact, some of the reasons for the success of the vapor category recently, they talk economy. They talk the value of the vapor proposition for a combustible smoker. And you can see here the consumers believe that. So when that price went up, they did look for a cheaper alternative, and vapor did pick up by quite a bit. And that's another typical result that we have seen. Okay, what about in Oklahoma? Again, here's when the SAT increased. Here's Oklahoma in the blue, and then surrounding states in the orange. And again, the significant drop in the volume in Oklahoma as compared to surrounding states. Let's look at this a little bit more graphically. All right, so with a few more figures. So if we look here at third quarter 2018, a drop in Oklahoma of 15.6%, only 4.9% in surrounding states, 13.4% in Oklahoma, surrounding states 5.5%. You can see here that it does appear maybe some of it moved. We don't see significant differences, but there was some movement in the cigarettes. Again, not as big of an SAT increase in this community. And then here, what happened to the categories? Interestingly enough, super premium did not go up as much here. Again, keep in mind, the SAT was only half, the increase was only half as much as it was in DC. And we can see here that deep discount picked up a little bit, though, in this case, because consumers did go to more of a value-type purchase. Okay, looking across again, and we're going to see similar results. So we saw the declines, right, in Oklahoma, over here in the surrounding states, a little bit of a pickup in super premium, as we've talked, consumers do that. Trade class, again, dollar stores having that perception of providing the value, and then we look across categories, people will turn to vapor. In a lot of cases, when there's an SAT increase on combustibles, people will look to vapor. And that's it. Those are the slides. So some interesting things that we saw today. We saw the impact of marijuana, right, on what it can have on cigars and possibly vapor. That was interesting. We saw what happened to Duluth. People will drive to get the products they want. Some interesting results today. Maybe we have 2 minutes for any questions. Anybody have anything? How many stores where? It was close to 300,000 stores when I look across all classes of trade. Convenience is about 150,000. Tobacco outlets about 12 to 15,000. Yes? You know what? We don't put it in this presentation, but we are. And I'll try to share that in the future because that's a category that's getting more attention, particularly in the convenience and tobacco outlet channel. We are beginning to track that, yes. But I don't have it yet in the presentations. Yeah, out there? Sorry, I had a hard time hearing that. Oh, I think you fill out a survey at the end of the conference here, and they will release to you this presentation. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, excellent question. That's an analysis we also have planned for a future presentation. We're going to look at same store. Here's what's happening in dollar channel. I mentioned how to watch out for that channel. You are right. Most of the growth that we're seeing currently is because they're adding distribution. But keep in mind, 2 to 3 times more stores than tobacco outlets, if they figure it out, are going to be a threat. I forgot to call this out because you bring up an important point, Frank. As you go through this presentation, if you look at vapor, dollar stores have been very slow to react to the right products to carry in the vapor category. So they have not been taking advantage of the increases in the vapor category more recently. They haven't quite figured that out yet. But when they do, and when they get their product selection right, they will be a force to watch. So I would keep an eye on it. But yeah, we're going to look at same store sales because that will tell us, are they able to grow the business they get, right? Yeah, we'll figure that out. Anything else? Yeah, so I don't know. So the question was, did Duluth figure out how much tax revenue they lost versus what they thought they were going to get? And you know, it just went to surrounding communities. The money is, right, all the same money's still there. It's just, but no, I don't know if they have. We typically don't see that they necessarily figure it out, but I don't know is the answer. Right. Yeah, that's all that happens. Right. Yes, sir, I'll take one more. Yes.
I want to ask, you think the cigarette category will decline at 3.5% this year? Is that macroeconomic factors, less e-vapor sales, anything behind like a little slower decline in volume?
Yeah, you're asking about the 5% decline in cigarettes, correct?
And then 3.5% to project for 2019.
And then for 2019, we're projecting it at 3.4%. In a lot of cases, there was a lot of trial this past year of the vapor category. We think that that may slow. We also think that there may that it will just normalize. I mean, I can't necessarily, but we just typically, the reason we typically see that over time it has been 3 to 4% has been the decline in cigarettes. We still believe it will normalize to that level. We think there may not be as much sample as vapor. We think other factors may be involved, but generally we see that. Just because that has been the trend, we're predicting that now for next year. We could be wrong though. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much everybody.